I was about 28 when my mother told me that my father was Aboriginal. She said, there's a couple of things I think you're old enough to know. And she told me that my father was Aboriginal. He'd passed away by then. And I remember the feeling of pride and I was angry as well, actually. I was angry that I'd been denied that, or it had never been acknowledged. A part of me had never been acknowledged. And the gift, I felt the gift that my mother had given me in acknowledging that, and I think it went much deeper than my mother's acknowledgement. It was more like society's acknowledgement, I guess, or the history of this country. My birth and conception place was Quilpie, out west, where the crows fly backwards to keep the sand out of their eyes. My grandmother used to say that. My father had 15 children. With my mother, he had 5 daughters, and that was Susie, Michelle, me, myself, and the twins, Rhonda and Donna. We were in an orphanage by the time the twins were 2 years old. I was 4. My mother and father, there were lots of issues for them, lots of struggles, and we couldn't stay together as a family. My father was actually sick. He'd been beaten up. He had been damaged from that, and that was because he had a child to another woman and the family retaliated. He was in a lot of pain a lot of times, and would come out in violent ways. And my mother tried to get us children away to safety. And back then there wasn't support for women to raise their children. Anyway, we were given to Dad, and Dad tried to look after us, but then he took us down to South Australia and to a family down there, and from there we were put into an orphanage. And we were fostered out to a couple who were old enough to be our grandparents, and they were of Swedish and German descent, to which I have great gratitude for them. From there I was placed into another foster home and into a schoolgirls' hostel. It was not until I was 14 before I met my mother again. We never thought our parents wanted us. We were always told they didn't want us. And when we got our records from the state government, these are some of the records that we got. And there's lots of times where our parents did try to get us. And it's got business here about the juvenile courts, you know, what happened when we were taken into care. This sort of language, like Seaforth Home, on remand until the 21st of the 1st, 63, till 18 years of age, destitute. Here it's got sitting at the juvenile court at Ceduna on the 18th day of December 1962, have found one charge of destitute child proved against one Terri Anne McKnight, a minor aged 5 years. What other? There's some other language in there. Yeah, neglected, committed to Seaforth Home until 18 years of age. And just that language is quite disturbing. And then this other information about my father trying to get us kids. In November 1960, Mr. McKnight's wife left him at Ipswich taking the 4 children. He came home from work to find she had gone, and sometime later that night the police called at his home with the 4 children and informed him that his wife had left the children in a park in Brisbane and disappeared. Yeah. Yeah, it's quite disturbing. Recently, while in Adelaide, I visited my non-Indigenous foster sister Deborah. I lived with her family for 11 years before being abruptly sent away to a government home called Davenport.
When I came to Nan and Pops and said, "Where are you girls?" You know, they said that you had gone. I had asked why, and they said that they couldn't cope with you guys anymore because of all the problems in the family. With my father, they were having hassles with them. And when I asked where you'd gone, they actually just said to a girls' home. And I don't recall whether they said you'd all gone to the same place. And I think it took me some time to find out where you were. Yeah, and I was just very upset and said to them, you know, why had they sent you away? That's how it felt. They had just sent you away. You know, as if you guys were really disposable, you know, you could take you one moment, get rid of you the next. I remember that's how it felt at the time. Yeah, and just being very, very upset and angry and saying, you know, why did you do it? You just can't do that. You just can't send them away. And I guess they were so caught up in their own problems that it just felt like they didn't care.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of my memories, you know, how come you don't care? You just can't.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's pretty emotional.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really big for me because, you know, I felt like I'd lost my sisters. It was actually very traumatic.
Yeah. When we first came here, like I remember, you know, that thing of Mum coming home. So there was no warning or anything.
No.
It was just we came home from school. That's it. Your welfare officer is here. She wants to talk to you. And then the welfare officer said, your mother needs to put you back in a home. So I'm going to take you around and show you today. So she brought us around, and we thought fantastic. Yeah. We thought because we'd actually run away. Yes. A couple of times and said we don't want to live there anymore. So all of that, but then it was a couple of days I think before we actually moved in. So we were still going to school and all that. And I remember Mum trying to talk to me about it, but I just wouldn't talk to her. I just went numb.
I guess we become quite desensitised, didn't we? And we tend to look back on it as, well, you know, we survived it. But as I, you know, talking about it before, when I remember the initial, when I found out that you guys had just been, it felt like you'd been taken away. And I guess it was sort of a feeling of isolation. Yeah. Of not displacement, I guess.
Yeah. I left state care as a teenager but didn't start my search for identity until late into my 20s, after my mother first told me about Dad being Aboriginal. So when I met my partner Terri years later, we both had been on this search for some time. We have very similar heritage. We both have Irish ancestry. Kerry's from Tipperary, his ancestry, and mine is from Kilkenny, Fitzgibbon, and our Aboriginal ancestry. And we've both been on the family search path for a while. And we both had experiences of racism and abuse.
Between the ages of 9 and 12, living in the inner suburbs of Sydney, a passive child, a free-spirited child that I was on the end of lots of abuse and lots of violence. I was continually called a wog and picked on, and I found that very difficult. Eventually I joined the Newtown Police Boys Club and became part of the local boxing team there, and eventually learned to fight back. So for years, being on the end of abuse and violence, being called a wog, I started to drink alcohol from about the age of 15 onwards, and whenever I felt confronted with abuse or violence, I'd retaliate, if under the influence of alcohol, with abuse and with violence. And that led to me being institutionalised several times, and clearly I didn't fit in traditional white culture. As I got older, I had started to have a closer look at where I really wanted to live, and every now and then I'd abscond whilst on bail or perhaps from an institution. I had a record as an absconder. And I would go bush. And I would seek a tranquil environment, if you like, an alternative to the environment that I was used to. But I still had this entrenched, violent reaction that required healing and some understanding and some growing up.
I remember having an experience where Dad had taken me, my foster father had taken me to a dance, a barn dance, and there was a young Aboriginal fella there, just in a group of friends, and we had such a strong connection with each other and just sat and yarned. And then this white fella started picking on him, and I was just devastated. My dad made me come away from there, and I just couldn't understand what was going on. But it was devastating to me.
When The Bug's Life came out, the first movie, The Bug's Life, I took my girls to see this Bug's Life movie. And where it was these grasshoppers overtook the ants. And this pseudo-culture came into play. And this other culture, which was a dominant culture, an aggressive culture, but it was a dumb culture. They didn't know how to plan. They didn't know how to read the lay of the land or understand the environment. And I was sitting there thinking, man, this is assimilation. This is what assimilation is all about, a dominant, aggressive society coming in and saying to another more powerful, more stronger, more united, more connected society, saying you're useless, you're no good. You know, you're here to serve us, you're here to provide for us. And that's assimilation.
The stolen generation occurred in the period between 1870 and 1970, when the authorities forcibly took children who were not full blood from their parents and put them into homes and orphanages. This was forced integration with white society, the assimilation policies of the time. There were many stories of our mob hiding behind bushes and in creek beds when the authorities came for the babies. And some fair-skinned babies would often be rubbed with charcoal so that they would look darker, so that they wouldn't be mistaken for being mixed-blood children. They'd look full-blooded. Recently at the Dreaming Festival 2007, Uncle Bobby Randall did his song about the stolen generation, Brown Skin Baby, and his daughter Dorothea did a really moving dance to that, which depicts or expresses a lot of what our families experienced with the stolen generation.
Between her sobs, I heard her say, "Police been taking my baby away from white man boss, that baby I had. Why he let him take your baby away?" Children's home, a baby came with new clothes on and a new name.
The stolen generation is a good example because we were just moved abruptly from everything that was important to us, you know, from our people, firstly, who carried the connectedness and share and help us learn and remember so that we could pass it on to our children. Because it's the old people that know your land, your stories, your culture, your language, the ceremonies that strengthen those through the many art forms.
It's interesting within my family, with Wurrunga, Carey, Donna and I, we all have Irish and Aboriginal ancestry, and yet we all look quite different. And it's very stark to see me as probably the most fair-skinned, and through to Wurrunga, who's very classical Aboriginal looking. I was just walking down the street and I could see this Aboriginal man, and he was charged. He'd obviously been drinking, and he was very aggressive towards some of the white fellas that were walking down the street. He was talking about, you know, your mob, you know, did all this sort of stuff to my family, and I could really see his hurt. I could really understand. You know, because I know the story, and as I walked up, I had this fear. Oh, when he sees me, he's going to think I'm a white fella. Then I suddenly had this calm come over me. No, it's okay. And as I walked up closer, before I even said anything, he just broke down. He just looked at me and said, "Sis, this is," you know, he started to cry. "This is how I'm feeling. This is what's going on for me, you know, this is what's happened to my family." And we just sat down and talked and shared, and that was real confirmation of me that he could actually see my spirit. He wasn't looking at my skin.
I first met Terri Anne about 9 years ago, and my first impressions was that she was an instant coffee, meaning that she all of a sudden wanted to be an Aboriginal. And being an Aboriginal isn't just a decision that you make, it's about what's inside and the way that you're brought up and have a connection to country. It's also not related to whether you can do artwork or whether you can sing a song or dance an Aboriginal song. It's about what's within.
I asked my mother to help me find my father's family, and she told me about an Aboriginal family out at Quilpie who treated Dad like he was family. I found her, and when I said who I was, she started to cry. She was really happy to see me and to help me. I asked her, was my dad Aboriginal? And she said yes. And I asked if she knew who our mob was, and she told me I was part of the Knight family from Burke, outback New South Wales. It was later confirmed that we belonged to Barkindji land. We belonged to Barkindji people, the Darling River people in northern New South Wales. When I found my mob, the Barkindji, I wanted to learn more about my particular law and culture. I wasn't able to find a Barkindji elder at the time to teach me my specific women's law, so I was taught by a Wiradjuri Aboriginal woman. Also much came from my ancestors and in my dreams. Also, the desert women from further north still held their law strong, and they were very open to sharing with us fair-skinned ones. So I went out there, and they knew that we needed support in learning our culture and law, and they were very accepting and supportive. I was adopted in and taught by the Borroloola women. Two of these Borroloola women were Topsy and her mother. We became very close, and they adopted me, so I became Topsy's sister. When Topsy's mother died, it was very important to Topsy and I that I attended her closing of the ground ceremony. So that's why I'm now going to Borroloola.
So now I'm pleased that she's heading north and she's going to spend time with the elders. So when she comes back from her journey, I'm looking forward to seeing what wisdom she's learnt from them.
The trip starts from my home in the lush, rainforesty, Sunshine Coast hinterland town of Mullaney. Just over an hour's drive north of Brisbane, where I will fly to Darwin, then change to a smaller plane where I'll fly to the mining town of MacArthur River. Topsy will be there to take me to Borroloola. See, I've really been missing her. I haven't seen her since Mum passed away, and we've come for this ceremony. And we talk a lot on the phone, and I've got lots of things that I want to know about, that I want to ask her and share with her about rights and responsibilities, I guess, as an Aboriginal woman and as part of being adopted into the Borroloola mob. I love the country around Borroloola. I was born in desert country, and there's an openness and vastness, a sense of freedom and space, room. Borroloola has about 800 people with about 500 Aboriginal people.
We're here because my mum passed away, and I'm happy to have you back here because we're going to go out for this cultural thing.
For me, this experience is more of a gift than Topsy even understands or I've even talked to her about. And for us, or for me, we didn't really have family as such. Like I mean, I have my mother and I've met my mother. We're in an orphanage and foster homes, you know, and then I've met my mother but never really felt like I belong in that family, sort of always feeling quite alien. And this feels different. I mean, maybe it's because it's our Aboriginality, that the connected, you know, being connected to this land and that sort of stuff that feels more at home for me. There's some excitement about the newness and the being able to learn and know this way. And I also feel deeply sad because, you know, I didn't have much time with her, and I have my sister and I didn't have much time with my mum, you know.
You're married to this man, you leave your mother and father, you're married to that man and you have kid to him. Well, that man said that's his family, his wife and his children, not his immediate family anymore. But in Aboriginal, it's different. You're still one big family. Even you leave your mother home, you got a wife, but you still relate to another mob. You're still a big family. I got a 3-bedroom house, and if... Nisha, can you put the blanket down, please? Or take it back inside if you don't want to... You want to make a mess in the front. So, as an Aboriginal, we have 3-bedroom house, but we welcome everybody in the house. We won't let anyone sleep outside. If it's rain, we can fit him in there, a lounge room, or in the other rooms. We won't let them stay out. And even if we share one food, if we got no food, we can go next door and get a feed because we're related. And if we don't want to go and ask person, we can sit home and maybe have something little to eat. And then you go and somebody will ask, what's wrong with you? And say, as an Aboriginal, you'll say, oh, I'm hungry, I just had one damper this morning. Or, have you got anything in your house? Nothing. Well, don't stay away. Come, go and help yourself at the fridge. I've got plenty of food to share with you. We share, even if we go fishing, we get a fish, we cook it up, and we have to share to 3 or 4 person, or maybe the person with the kids, we share it. It's all about sharing. Aboriginal share everything.
Yeah. Bit copper. Thank you. What's up? Not much. Not much.
Aboriginal culture teach you a lot of things that you should be listening to your elders, or look after your wife properly, your children properly. If you're a man, you're a leader of that family, and you look after your kids and wife properly.
Some dances and songs are just for sharing publicly. They're often called fun dances or sharing of culture. Some songs and dances are simply given as a gift to you personally, not to be shared. And other business is sacred business or ceremony that is not shared with anyone outside, and no cameras are allowed in to record them.
My grandparents told me that I have a dreamer called Devil Dreamer, and she was a woman in that time walking around, walking towards this camera standing in front of me here, She was walking that way, but her foot pointed the other way. So if she go and steal something and walk away, they'll track her going the wrong way. They reckon she's going that way. I pointed behind me. He had her foot pointing this way, but she was going that way. So they call her back to front feet in white man way, and in language we call her banjani janga, back to front feet. And that's what my dreaming.
Walking along the street the other day just by myself, and there was a group of little Borroloola kids looking at me, and one of them said, "Hey miss, how come you're not wearing any shoes?" And I said, "Why don't you wear shoes?" And this other little fella said, because he's black. He doesn't wear shoes because he's black. And I said, "Well, I got black ancestors too." They're real little treasures, little gems I'm going to take home after this visit. And all these kids, you know, calling me Nana Terri, Nana TA. Yeah, it just really warms my heart. Really feel like I've got a big mob of family now. And now we're going bush. We're going to do the ceremony, the closing of the ground ceremony. So, how do you feel about going out?
Happy, kind of. A bit nervous. I haven't been there before and I don't know where it is and what could happen.
While I was in Borroloola, we did predominantly women's business, but I had the privilege of meeting some of our elders, including grandfather Lindsay, who works at the art centre, and he shares and demonstrates the making of boomerangs and rope making.
Yeah, this is probably longer one now. See how you do. I start do this one here. Yeah, the better one movie. That's him, right?
Claire Roberts was another artist that works from the Art Centre that shares her knowledge around traditional ways.
If you see a hollow log and you tap it and you chop that tree down and just make a didgeridoo out of it. Look on there. It's called smoke tree. Clay, it's used for painting your body, for getting ready for dance. Sometimes they eat that clay to make stomach clean.
Here we've got Claire showing some of the materials used for her painting.
Just the colour there. Yellow, and this one it's red color, brownish color.
Now she's showing the beginning stages of another painting.
It's not really finished yet, just the start. Just the bush colour. That's how you make it. That's how you turn out that colour.
I've just come back from the Borroloola bush where I attended the closing of the ground ceremony. This is sacred women's business, where men and cameras aren't allowed, so any images shown here are representative and not of the actual ceremony. What I can say is that the conditions in the bush were really harsh, with extremes of hot and cold. We cooked by the fire and we slept on the earth. I found this really strengthening, and I found a place of peace in myself that I haven't really known before. There was so much respect and warmth shared between all of us. What struck me about the grieving process was that there was such openness and rawness of emotions. No airs or graces, no self-consciousness. Just what you see is what you get. So natural and sincere. It's been a really humbling experience and a real honour and a great time of learning for me with my Borroloola family. And I already feel the sadness at having to leave them, but I need to go home to my family. And I'm only home for a few days, and then we're going to the Women's Law and Culture Gathering. So I'll be with my Borroloola family again in Alice Springs for the Women's Law Gathering. It's really important for me going out to these women's law meetings. I'm energised by them. This year quite a few local women are coming for the first time, who I'll be responsible for, as well as my Borroloola family. Two of the women are Auntie Edna Kiner and her niece Eni Kiner, who are Dunghi Dao people of the Dreaming and Woodford Festival sites near Maleny.
We have our own dance troupe, which I'm very proud of, and they consist of my daughters, my grandchildren, Eni and her children, and we're out there, and they're doing well. They are young women proud of their culture. They're proud of Dunghi Dao country, where that's their country. They've danced, brought language back to that country, which was taken away from them.
Our costumes are a women's costume that are based on our Dunghi Dao tribe. Aboriginal women of the Dunghi Dao people wore feathers in their hair, so that, for when we did corroboree, song and dance ceremony, women would wear the feathers. Women also name their daughters after flowers, trees, plants and feathers, whereas the men name the boys after animals and markings. They represent the fern, and this is sort of like a fishbone design of a fern that I'm not quite sure of the name, but grandfather William Mackenzie, one of our last full-blood men, he used to paint up like this, and this is where we get our designs from, which is the fern. And so the dots represent the spores of the fern, and that's so, yeah. Having Auntie Eddie come out to do this culture and law, it's like things would happen like that in the old days. It was passed from mother to daughter. And that, so even though we're coming out to learn the same things, it's still going to be passed from, like mother to daughter. Like Auntie Eddie, you'll learn a lot of stuff, and I'll take it back and I'll share it with my cousins, Auntie Eddie's daughters, and then the girls will share it with their daughters. I haven't got any daughters, so I'll have to fix that up, I think. But at the moment it'll be passed down, through my cousin's daughters and pretty much from where our grandparents, and all the old people, where they were taken to Cherbourg Mission and all that sort of stuff, where our old people had papers to sign to be able to leave that community to go out into the, into towns and everything, we now are able to regain our culture. A lot's been lost, but you can redream it. And that's what we've been doing. Auntie Eddie tells me she has a lot of dreams, and that, like, I have a lot of dreams, and that's why, in Aboriginal culture we call the, like, our spirituality the dreaming.
I remember I had a lot of dreams and visions about an old Aboriginal woman would come to me every time I had some sort of struggle in my life. There'd be a whole mob of them. I could see them in this vision or in my dreams whenever I needed some sort of support. They've always been there right through my life.
This physical world is only temporary. The spirit realm and the spirit world is very real. And Aboriginal people have this, we are first and foremost spirit people. We understand about the spirituality. We have this ancestral spirits around about us. They protect us, they guide us, they speak to us, they train and teach us, you know, and our dreaming comes from these ancestral spirits and who we are and what we're meant to do.
Uncle Bobby is a traditional custodian of Uluru and I've known him for many years. I call Uncle Bobby Uncle out of respect. It's our Aboriginal way to call our elders aunt or uncle. He's been a great friend and teacher to me, including in spiritual matters. So when we met in Alice Springs, he invited us to his home at Midajulu near Uluru to talk specifically about Aboriginal spirituality.
That word Ganyini, unconditional love with responsibility, is such a beautiful word. And I like to strive to live that, and how I test myself is with every single person I meet, every single bird I look at. I have an appreciation of that, and you feel good within yourself, you know, and then walking the land, the beauty of everything that is around you is absolutely superb and wonderful. And the feeling of belonging to a huge family, look, you can't beat when you know within yourself that you belong to every living thing that's out there as a family member. You can't beat that.
Talking about the spirituality, they're deeply connected, or we're deeply connected to nature, to the earth, to the rivers, the trees. We have a kinship relationship with all these things, and if you disconnect us in any way from those things, that's a part of us that destroys our spirit.
When we talk about the Kanyini principles, that connectedness is to the concept of your belief system, of one's spirituality, of one's family, of one's home base. And each of those lines need to be really strong with you yourself. And you feel so strong, and you are so big. Everything out there is saying that I am part of you, you are part of me. And it's a beautiful energy and consciousness, and I think that's the accessible route we got to our super consciousness level.
I really identify with the Kanyini principle. I feel a connectedness and empathy with nature and people. I also try to be responsible and unjudgmental as an expression of unconditional love with responsibility. I thought a lot about the difference between blackfellas and whitefellas and what it means to be an Aboriginal person. Firstly, being an Aboriginal person is not about the colour of our skin, but about the colour of our mind, how we think and how we dream. Aboriginal people think differently to white people. It's just like black and white. The difference is black and white. Opposite, think opposite. White fellas live by their watches, and black fellas more by their instincts and natural time. White fellas tend to hoard or save, while Indigenous people, they share. They're very sharing. The black fellas are basically listeners. They don't speak unless it's important, whereas white fellas are opposite to that, basically verbalisers. They speak first before listen. The eye contact, very little eye contact in Aboriginal communities. It's impolite to have eye contact. Indirect questioning, talking around the point, is what Aboriginal people tend to do more, whereas white fellas, they're direct, very to the point questions. When someone's done something wrong in the Indigenous community, they're not isolated, they're accepted. White culture is more about their rights, whereas black culture is about responsibilities and respect to our families, our elders and nature. We're in tune with nature, whereas often whites are in conflict with it. White fellas want to own the land, while black fellas feel that they're part of the land land owns them, or they belong to the land. And I believe most of this is generally true about all Indigenous people of the world. I loved being away with my desert mob, as well as coming home to my rainforest mountain mob, Mullaney family and community, some eager to hear about my latest journey north.
When she comes, I'll just...
Hi guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ah, hi.
How you going?
Yeah, good. How are you? Good. Yeah, well,
Look, I'll just make a cup and you can sit there, Beck.
Thanks a lot, Terri. So how was your trip?
oh, fantastic. Just really... Oh, I feel humbled and privileged. Yeah,
That's good. How were the old girls?
oh, really open and accepting and welcoming. Yeah.
Mum taught me a lot of things about how to be an Aboriginal. And I believe that you get it from the old women.
Yeah.
Have you found that in your journey?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it has always been there, of course, because it's in my spirit, you know. It's in me. But teaching us our law and our way of being and our spirituality. Like, I was raised to go to church, but when I go out there, I felt as though that was really my spirituality, my journey to find my family. And I learnt more and more from them. And now going out to the desert, it's been what you just said about what your mum taught you, patience. And I hardly spoke when I was out there. You know, respect, like those basic laws of respect and what our responsibilities are in the kinship system, and just how all embracing they were. So for me, going to the desert and learning the ceremonies and the culture and learning the dances and the songs, for me are practicing my Aboriginal spirituality.
Oh, great, Terri. Thanks a lot. Lovely.
Fantastic.
Good on you, mate. You're a real star. Going from being in white society to Aboriginal society, I know that some Aboriginal would be forthright and not accepting of you, but other Aboriginal people would be. So how did you find your way that now you're accepted?
Okay, it's been a long journey, and I've probably been seriously on that journey for over 20 years now, since Mum, you know, sharing that with me. Your father was Aboriginal, and sometimes I've run Aboriginal organisations and been afraid to walk in like this, and because I thought I would definitely get rejected. And I remember talking on the phone and saying, you know, telling my story, and someone saying to me, well, you have, we have lots of fair-skinned blackfellas, you know.
Yeah.
That's, you know. And I started to, or saying to me, it's in your spirit.
Yeah.
It's not to do with the colour of your skin, it's in your spirit. So slowly I started to move in the community.
So now with all these things that you've learned, how do you see yourself in the future?
I've got a stronger commitment to helping other people find the sense of peace and belonging that I've got now. Also continue working in that place of bridging the cultural divide, like the being able to be the bridge, because I am Aboriginal and I have black and white heritage. I'm proud of my Aboriginal heritage, and now I understand much more about my identity and what it means to be an Aboriginal person.